prior to this day, there was a whole lot of speculation about who was calling this march. And before our brother comes, I want to just clarify to the world that God called this march through nobody else but the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. There has been an attempt to separate the message and the magnitude of this march from the messenger. We are not going to let that happen. This is a march for and by black men, supported by black women, supported by black youth, black students, the black community, black church, black mosques, black fraternities. I want to thank the Panhellenic Council, and particularly the Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, for giving us their national headquarters for the national headquarters of the Million Man March. When you see 1 million men standing, and in fact now we're told we have almost 2 million standing, that just didn't happen. It took a lot of people organizing, a lot of people working together to make this happen. And this is not just a one-day event.
And now, in spite of all that division, in spite of all that divisiveness, we responded to a call. And look at what is present here today. We have here those brothers with means and those who have no means, those who are light and those who are dark, those who are educated, those who are uneducated, those who are business people, those who don't know anything about business, those who are young, those who are old, those who are scientific, those who know nothing of science, those who are religious and those who are irreligious, those who are Christian, those who are Muslim, those who are Baptist, those who are Methodist, those who are Episcopalian, those of traditional African religion. We got them all here today. We are forced by the magnitude of what we see here today, that whenever you return to your cities and you see a black man, a black woman, don't ask him what is your social, political, or religious affiliation, or what is your status. Know that he is your brother. And if it needs help, you are obligated to help your brother because he is your brother. You must live beyond the narrow restrictions of the divisions that have been imposed upon us. I put my life on this. To rob you is a sin. To use you and abuse you is a sin. To make mockery of your love and your trust is a sin. And we repent of all sin. And we refuse to do sin anymore. Is that agreeable, black man?
So we want to welcome all of our listeners again to another edition of the Souls of Black Folk broadcast. And of course, we are always reminding you that you can go to the website, noi.org, to get what we call a mountain hill of information about what we're doing from our flagship mosque in Chicago, the Final Call radio program, which is 24 hours a day. You can go to it, and we've been renewed for another contract on that. The Final Call newspaper, you can get it delivered right in your city. However, we have a digital subscription now, and it's real convenient to keep up with a lot of the issues of the day. And so many people ask us about Minister Louis Farrakhan and how he's doing. You can find out a lot of that by keeping up with the Final Call newspaper also. And we can let you know about the Final Call bookstore and all the products that you can get. Well, on this edition, we have titled this The National Agenda. And I'm not sure how many people, I'm on social media a lot, really remember the national agenda. And we have a very special guest today. I can remember years ago, I was still living in Chicago, reading about the Wilmington 10. And it was a big controversial situation coming out of North Carolina. And I saw this brother's face. Um, Years later, he became the president, CEO of the oldest civil rights organization in the country, the NAACP. But ultimately, from that position of the NAACP, he began to work with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he became the national director of one of the largest mobilizations of our people in this country. We haven't seen anything like that on a massive scale, and it certainly exceeded the large rallies of Mr. Marcus Garvey, the Million Man March. From that, the Poor People's Political Convention, the setup of NALS, which was the National African American Leadership Summit, and now the National Newspapers Association. And so we want to welcome to the Souls of Black Folk broadcast none other than our own Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Brother Rodney, and good morning, Brother Michael. And on behalf of the Black Press of America, because one of our major newspapers right there in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Tribune.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bob Bogle is the publisher.
Mm.
We have 230 African American owned newspapers, including the Final Call, members of the NNPA, and we're very pleased. This is my 8th year with the NNPA, and we're making progress. Even during COVID, our newspapers are still publishing, both print as well as digital. We reach somewhere over 30 million people a week just in print, and now with the digital space. So we're very pleased. In fact, I'm speaking to you this morning from Phoenix, Arizona, where our newspaper in Phoenix, the Arizona Informant, led by publisher Clovis Campbell, he sponsors an annual African American, who has called the Arizona Black Rodeo. So I was the Grand Marshal this weekend for the Arizona Black Rodeo.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the Black press has a lot of diversity, and I'm glad you mentioned the Million Man March, because I always tell people, long live the spirit of the Million
Man March. That's what I remember. And you know, Ben, and I heard the minister say more than once that an episode like that in our chapters in America, we're only going to get to do that once. He said, the way God blessed us, we won't be able to go back and necessarily repeat what we did that day, October the 16th, 1995. But so since no one is going to go duplicate what God blessed you all to do, can you walk us through how did we get to that big moment in Washington, D.C.?
Well, thank you. It was a historic event. It still is a historic event. I think that a lot of things happened after the Million Man March in 1995, but it was because of the Million Man March, you know. And one of the young people out in the audience in 1995 was, at that time, State Senator Barack Obama. This is before he came. He was there with his pastor, Jeremiah Wright, Trinity Church from Chicago. And he later became president of the United States in 2008. And you remember the national agenda that we published went up to 2008.
Sure
people
did.
want to know, why were we forecasting that far ahead? And that's because political empowerment doesn't happen overnight. Economic empowerment doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's a period of time to engage our communities. You know, we used to say that if you want to develop communities, you first got to develop self. You know, self-development is the key to community development. And certainly that takes time. And I think the pivotal moment, to answer your question, prior to 1995, Brother Rodney and Brother Michael, you recall, the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, had declared young Black males as an endangered species. And that was because of all of the fratricide. We were killing one another.
Yeah.
Record numbers all over the country. It was a national problem, and hardly no one was dealing with it. So
Mm.
the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan, almost 18 months before the Million Man March, was having these tours of Black men in major cities to
That's
address
right.
how we're going to stop killing one another. And out of that, in fact, it was at one of those major rallies that the minister first uttered the term Million Man March, bringing a
Yeah,
million to Washington.
he
And of
sure
course,
did.
at the time, I was uh, president and CEO of the NAACP
Yes, sir.
in Baltimore. And when I heard, the minister make this call, I said, man, that's something that we all need to support. And of
Hmm.
course, by 1995, I was at the helm of the NAACP for 2 years, 93 and 94. So the very next year is when the minister called for the march. And I think it was in the early spring of 1995, the minister asked me to be the national director of
That's
the
right.
march. And I want to tell you that a lot of my colleagues in the civil rights movement were saying, man, that's not going to happen. You're going to ruin your reputation working with the minister. Y'all got it wrong. I said, look, this is a lifetime opportunity. Was it a lot of hard work? Yeah, it was a lot of hard work. But look, the benefit of your work, I mean, networking.
Yeah,
We established something called local organizing committees, LOCs.
that's right.
And
Yes.
I remember Philadelphia had one of the largest LOCs in the country.
Oh,
We
yes, sir.
had so many buses coming out of Philadelphia for the meeting. The bus companies ran out of buses.
Yeah, we ran out.
Yeah,
Man, I
yeah.
tell you.
So
It,
it was a great learning because what we learned, Brother Rodney and Brother Michael, was that we have a greater capacity than sometimes we even give ourselves credit for in
mhm.
terms of mobilizing and organizing. And by establishing those LOCs in all the major cities, we learned that we have a lot of common interests, even though some of us are Muslims, some of us were Christians, some of us were
Mhm.
traditional African religion, some of us were nationalists, some of us were socialists, some of us was integrationists, some of us were didn't believe in integration.
Mhm.
We put all those differences aside and said, well, what is it we can all agree on? And what we started agreeing on, what became the founding principles of the Million Man March, where
Yeah.
we started taking responsibility for our communities. And because in some communities, they were trying to bring in more police. And we know that just having more police does not solve the problem in our communities.
That's right.
We need to start turning to one another, not turning on each other. And
Mhm.
of course, prior to the Million Man March, we also had the East-West conflict, among
Oh, yeah.
some of the gang members and the Bloods and the Crips and the
Mhm.
Gangsters Disciples and et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. All of us, we worked together, and it was a great. So the Million Man March was a triumph. In fact, on that day, you recall it was a Monday. October 16th,
Yeah.
1995
Yeah.
was a Monday. It was a work day. And every time I'm on the Amtrak train, I see some of those same conductors because all the way from Boston to Washington, the conductors on
Wow.
the Amtrak you didn't have to have no ticket. You just got on that train and headed to Washington. The trains were packed.
They
The
were.
buses were packed. All the rest stops were packed. I mean, it was like, in the Quran it says, standing in ranks like a
Yeah.
mighty army. That's what the Million Man March was,
Mm.
and it was a great display. It was a great achievement. First,
Mhm.
a man of God had to call for it. The Honorable
Mhm.
Mr. Farrakhan called for it, and it was a resonating response to that call from all across religious lines, across
Mhm.
geographical lines. It was a great display, and of course that day everybody, it was harmony. I mean, I think to see a million brothers stand together,
Mhm.
and pray together. I remember when Sheikh
Lumumba.
Lajani,
Oh,
Sheikh Lajani,
Johnny. Yeah.
yeah, gave the call to prayer. Early that morning, just as the sun was creeping up. I mean,
Mm.
you could hear it all over the nation's capital.
Wow.
one thing, just as a historical note, the sound system that we had at the Million Man March was the largest sound system ever put together in the history of DC.
Wow.
We had enough sound for 4 Super Bowls. That's why if you stood on the steps of that Capitol, all the way down 14, 15 blocks away at the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial, you could hear clearly, crisp, in real time what was said. And of course, then we had the video screen. People hadn't seen that many Jumbotron video screens before. So we did a lot of things, and a lot of behind the scenes. Yes, we did all the organizing with the LOCs, but to put all the logistics together, how do you get 1 million people into Washington, and how you get 1 million people out of the Washington without any incident?
Yeah,
And that was one of the triumphs of the Million Man March.
man. And I remember Joe Sertain from here in Philadelphia. He was city managing director. He turned out to have to come to Washington to really help you all with those kind of logistics.
That's right. I remember Joe Sertain used to tell us command and control. And so, what is command and control? And we had our own internal walkie-talkies back in those days. We didn't have those cell phones like we have now. And we had a great discipline. There was no disorder. There was no drama. It was spiritual unity, and when you have that kind of unity, you're going to have tremendous success.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember Henry Nichols of the Hospital Workers Union, but they ended up having to go nationwide to get medical practitioners to participate and set
medical
up the first aid
doctors,
stands.
ambulances.
Yes.
We had to bring our own ambulances. We had to have our own healthcare tents.
Wow.
I remember Dr. Lean was the chair of the medical committee. We had doctors come from all over the country to participate, nurses, to just be in preparation. The same thing with lawyers. We had Black lawyers from all over the country, male and female, to come. So, we had a systematic approach to organizing where every, even the water distribution, there had never been 40,000 porta johns in one place before. So, all these things you have to think about in terms of, we brought out the subway system because you couldn't get, 50,000 buses into DC. So a lot of the buses parked out on the Beltway, and we took the subway. We brought out the subway system. So nobody would have a problem getting off the bus, getting on the subway, so the logistical triumphs. And in fact, people are still studying right now, even at the Pentagon. They're trying to figure out, how did that mobilization happen? What can we learn from it?
Isn't that something?
Go ahead.
That's right. Even after the Million Man March, they had the Promise Keepers. They went and got our permit, studied it, and then you had the Millions Moms March. Everybody was trying to pattern themselves after the Million Man March.
Yeah, they were. I'm glad you mentioned women. I thought about Cora Masters Berry. I thought about Dorothy Height and others. Talk about the women that helped us. Even though it was a Million Man March, a lot of Black women helped us.
Oh, absolutely. Well, a lot of Black women told brothers, you better go to Washington, and then they helped organize. So at our local organizing committees all over the country, there were also sisters who were co-chairs of the local organizing committee. And then on the national level, Marion Barry's wife, the Honorable Marion Barry, was the mayor at the time. Believe me, we could not have had a successful Million Man March without the support of the Honorable Marion Barry and his first lady, Cora Masters Berry, played a role. But at that time, keep in mind, this is 1995, we registered over 250,000 people to vote at the Million Man March.
At
on
the
day.
Yeah.
And Sister Berry helped lead that effort.
And I remember immediately after the march, because people are always talking about follow-up, but 1.7 million young people around the country registered to vote.
That's right.
The National Social Workers, Black Social Workers Association talked about somewhere between 15,000, 25,000 applications going in for Black orphans.
That's right. And the majority of the children that needed to be adopted after the Million Man March, we put out the 1-800 number. I went into families today, years later, who adopted those children. All 25,000 children were adopted by Black families after the Million Man March. And of course, remember you mentioned about black on black crime. For the first time in history, not just only in DC, but in New York, in LA, in Chicago, in Detroit, all the major cities, in Philly, black on black crime went down to almost zero.
Yeah, it
So we
really,
show we can do it.
That's right.
You know,
yeah,
we can do it one day, we can do it every day.
we could do it every
So
day.
that's
We'll
right.
talk about some of the follow-up now. I remember us going to St. Louis. It was like a poor people's political convention. We also had the Day of Atonement in New York City, right by the United Nations.
United Nations, that's right.
Yeah,
So we you know, our interest was to how do we keep the momentum alive after having such a historic event. So in fact, a couple of months right after the Million Man March, we convened at Howard University to discuss how to keep the movement going. Primarily at that time, keeping the LOCs, but also keeping NAILS, the National African American Leadership Summit, alive to keep these constituencies working together. And then in 1996, we had in the summer of 1996, we had the convention in Detroit, in St. Louis.
St. Louis.
That was great, where we again came up with ways and means to define all of the issues that we needed to define politically. And then we came back on the first anniversary to have the mobilization at the United Nations
Yeah,
in 1996. And then, you know, by the time the fifth anniversary came along, we came up with the idea of having the Million Family March.
yes,
But before then, I want to give the sisters in Philly a credit because in 1997, we had the Millions Woman March in Philly.
that's right. That's right.
And almost a million sisters showed up for that, man. That was great turnout. You know, and I know we actually, to be very honest, we working behind the scenes. We wanted to make sure our sisters were successful. So
Yeah.
I was spending a lot of time going back and forth to Philly.
hmm
Mr. Rodden, you remember?
Yeah.
Making sure
Winnie
that the Million
Mandela
Women's
came.
March,
Yeah.
that's right, making sure that the Million Women's March was successful, and it was successful. So you know, each year leading up to the Million Family March, we had activities to keeping that momentum coming. Then, but the Million Family March was successful, and then of course we've done other marches. But I think what the Honorable Minister Farrakhan said uh, turned out to be prophetic. There was only 1 million man march. Where no one that while people have tried to replicate it, no
Yeah.
one has been able to replicate.
That's right.
And
That,
because see, that's the thing, because the ultimate blessings comes from the Creator, comes from God.
That's right.
You know, so we were blessed that day, and
yeah.
as a result of those blessings, it is a new benefit. Because as you know now, other people around the world, they tried to have a Million Man March in Africa, one in the Middle East. Everybody was using that term, million man, you know.
They have. They put it. Now the minister had you put together a document. I know I brought it with me, the national agenda.
Yes.
Talk about how that really came together, because I know there are organizations that all played a role in some kind of input.
Yes. Well, we had an editorial committee that worked on the national agenda for about 9 months. And then after it was written, then getting it published in time for Savior's Day. Because it was first presented at Savior's Day, and then also at the Million Family March. It was the document that we used to mobilize to get the Million Family March done. So you know, but it was 1998 through 2008, I believe, is when we first
Right.
came out with it. Right, and it was at Savior's Day in 1998 that was first presented. Because in 1997, the minister said, I need an agenda. We need an agenda. And so we took on the assignment to make sure that that happened. And that was a great time. And as you know,
Yeah.
some of the items that we projected in 1998 came true in 10 years. In 2008, Barack Obama was elected the first Black president of the United States.
Yes. Yes.
So people don't understand there's a logical sequence of events that led to that historic election, and then other things that happened, you know, in the ensuing years. I think that the impact of having an agenda like that that gave us a sense of focus locally, regionally, statewide, as well as national and even international. Yes. Then the minister took his worldwide tour also after the Million Man March, where he began to get people around the world to have solidarity with what took place in 1995.
Yeah, I think that was such a misunderstood thing. Do you think, I mean, obviously, homicides were down and everything, but now there's been a recent spike in homicides in the major cities of America. And there's more talk of poverty, even gentrification. And when I became president of the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP,
Yes.
I used the National Agenda book as my roadmap. And I began to see in careful review, we had talked about all these things that folks are, that are highlighting the news today, the hot button issues, they're all in the national agenda.
Exactly, exactly. The national agenda was very thorough. It covered all of the issues, but it also gave us a roadmap of how to address these issues. Now, bringing it forward to today, Brother Minister Rodney, um, I still think we should learn from that because the organizing, if somehow we could reactivate our LOCs, that would make a big difference. Because no one single organization can do it all. We need more organizational unity among all of our organizations, all of our fraternities, sororities, all our national organizations. We got organizations. Our problem is disunity. We don't work together like we should. Sometimes when there's a crisis like what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis, then the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, which certainly the Black press supports. But the thing is, you begin to see how fractured we are. It's interesting, Mr. Rodney. Well, on the one hand, we've made this progress, but on the other hand, the fundamentals of unity, the fundamentals of working together, that's something we have to just constantly to work on. Unfortunately, it does not pass on from generation to generation. You mentioned Marcus Garvey. You mentioned W.B. Du Bois. You mentioned the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. All of the prior movements, lay a foundation. In my view, each generation should benefit from the legacy of the prior generation. We shouldn't have to go back and reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yeah.
We have to learn from that wheel. We have to learn from that progress. We have to learn from, to me, the importance of our history is to learn from it, not necessarily to repeat it.
Yeah.
We have to, and of course, as you know, right now in 2021, in Pennsylvania and most states, they're debating now about school curriculum. If you really want to teach school children the truth about slavery, of course you do. And that's one of the reasons why we got the race problem in America, because everybody's in denial that systemic racism exists, in denial that systemic economic exploitation still exists. You mentioned gentrification, and nobody wants to stay poor. Nobody wants to stay hungry. Nobody wants to always be outcrying. We need to be moving forward and getting more traction. So I think there's still a lot to be learned from the days of the Million Man March, a lot to be learned from the national agenda as we move forward in 2021, 2022, 23, and 2024. You see what happens. Sometimes there are peaks and sometimes there's valleys.
Yeah.
And, everything is, yes, who's in the White House is important, but who's in our houses is even more important.
Yes.
And how we organize. The triumph of the Million Man March was one of the most successful grassroots organizing campaigns and mobilization in the history of humankind.
Yes. Yeah, because if I read the USA Today right, the marshal who's pretty much over demonstrations, he saw that as one of the most organized, peaceful demonstrations in the history of protests in Washington, D.C.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
like I say, I have friends in the military. They tell me the people at the Pentagon were actually studying. They were trying to figure out how, because when you move troops, there's always fatalities. When they have mobilization, even sometimes when mobilize the National Guard when there's urban situations. There's
Hmm.
fatalities just in the mobilization.
Yes. Yeah.
So we were very successful, and again, it's a great model that we can learn from even today.
Yeah. When I reviewed the real history of the March on Washington in 1963, I didn't realize how fearful the government was, because really, from the time we were brought here as slaves through the whole Jim Crow era, there had never been an amassing of Black people in the numbers that came there. I think that was about 250,000, but
That's
they
correct.
talked about
In
pulling the plug.
1963. Yeah,
Yeah,
1963.
1963. And they were talking about pulling the plugs if there was inflammatory speech in that. There was a great fear of what would happen that day, even though the big six civil rights organizations had come together. So I figured by 1995, they probably expected to hear some things that would be uncomfortable for white America.
Exactly. So brother
It
Rodney,
was almost
brother Michael,
history 101 for white America.
absolutely. I have about 2 more minutes, Chief, and then I'm gonna have to
Okay,
go.
okay.
But look, I'm very pleased that y'all doing this program,
Yes,
and
sir.
I'll be willing to come back sometime. I wish you all the
Oh
best.
man, yeah, we need to talk about the Black press and getting the word out, Ben. I mean, I appreciate you giving us this time. Yeah, if you had any comment you wanted to leave the audience with, this is the best time to do it since your time is short.
Well, thank you. I just want to say that 2021, in spite of the pandemic that our communities are still in, there's so much opportunity out here, Brother
Hmm.
Rodney and Brother Michael, that we need to pull our resources, band together, have more unity in our community, and to address some of these issues. I'm always concerned about our young people. We need to raise up a new generation of freedom fighters
Hmm.
among millennials, among Generation Z. Everybody's into the technology. Everybody's got a cell phone. The question is, what are we doing with these devices? So I think we need a Black consciousness app where
Yeah,
as soon as you cut your phone on, boom, you hit
that's not a bad idea.
something. Yep. I've been saying that because I think that we're not going to be able to get our people away from the devices, but the thing is how we use the device
Hmm.
to have more education, to have more insight of what the strategies that we need to be all engaged in. So I'm optimistic. That's the point I want to
Hmm.
leave with, Brother Rodney, that I think that we can still, we've won some victories in the past. We have to learn from those. But I think we have to go out now and continue to struggle. In African liberation, when they say a luta continua, the struggle continues.
Struggle continues.
The struggle continues. That's what I want to leave on, that
Okay.
God has blessed us in the past, God will bless us in the present, and God will bless us in the future. But a
Okay.
luta continua, the struggle continues.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And so, uh, we'll do everything to have you back, certainly. And thank you for sharing the time with us.
All right. God bless. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we've been listening to the Reverend and Dr. Ben Chavis of the NNPA now, and he was the national director of the Million Man March. So, Brother Michael, we were trying in a condensed period to cover a big span of history.
Yes, sir.
But I think scripturally we looked at the Million Man March like Jesus calling Lazarus.
Right.
And after 4 days of death, or 400 years uh, of enslavement, mental death and slavery, we saw the minister's call for Lazarus to come forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just scripturally, we were looking at things that were unfolding, because the minister moves on inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And he says everything that the Nation of Islam does, it's by way of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that, um, when he's inspired, he can really give his attention and his energy to something. And this was something he wanted to do. And it was still formulating. I can remember Reverend James Bevel saying to the minister and to the group sitting there at the table, we need to um, we need to atone, we need to purify and work. But when he said atone, that resonated through the
Right.
minister.
Mhm.
And because the minister kept saying there's something else, just coming to the march, he was looking for something to attach to this march or serve as a theme. And atonement turned out to be it, because when you go scripturally, you see that Aaron,
Mhm.
not Moses, called the Day of Atonement,
Right.
and and that was God's order. God never ordered Moses to call the Day of Atonement. He ordered through Moses for Aaron to do it. So I thought that was interesting. So you have any thoughts on?
You know, you
Obviously, you were in the nation during that period.
yeah, it was at the march too. And you know, brother minister, you said it, and brother Ben said it also, that um the organization, the unity among all the black men that were there, really over 1 million, close to 2 million people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the underlining uh, idea that always should be kept out front is that God was present and had his hand on that day with the zero
Mm-hmm.
crime throughout this nation. That beautiful um, spirit of atonement and reconciliation that was presented. And then
Mm-hmm.
out of that, 8 steps of atonement, a process for people to really atone with God and then with themselves. This march was unlike any march in
Mm-hmm.
history, and and like we heard from brother Ben Chavis, there'll never be another one like it. And it's just so much has come up out of those words that the minister spoke that day. We have the national agenda, we have a program now. And like our
Mm-hmm.
brother said, if we could reignite the local organizing committees and get our
Yeah.
people involved throughout this nation, we would be able to really
Yeah, and
be
I
a
think a lot of
spiritual
people
organization.
see that too. Black
Mhm.
disconnection, black disunity. I can remember two things. The first thing they tried to do, the enemy tried to do, was discredit the march by undercounting the people that came to participate.
Right.
And the minister felt strongly that we had to fight that.
Hmm.
And I can remember Dr. Ben Chavis going on interviews on television. I can remember the minister's son-in-law, Brother Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad, going on, and even our own regional minister of the East Coast at that time, Minister Don Muhammad, was on television disputing their claims to undercount the number of people that came out and participated. And one of the things that that subway turnstile showed is that on an average Monday, an average weekday, about 202,000 people ride that metropolitan subway
Hmm.
train in Washington, D.C. On Monday, October the 16th, 847,000 people rode that train, because that turnstile gives you an accurate count. So just by virtue of the train,
That's right. Yeah.
we're already near 1 million. We're not even talking about the people that drove in.
Hmm.
We're not even talking about the people that got there before and were in the hotels. And we're not talking about the black folks that lived in Washington, D.C. area that only needed to walk over toward the park. Easily, we can show that 1 million or more people, men, were at that march. But by the height of the day, we were near 2 million. We had flooded over every area of Washington, D.C., but they wanted to undercount it. But I do remember the minister interviewing with Cokie Roberts and Sam Donaldson at that time on ABC, and they were trying to take apart his address that day. And because he talked about the reflecting pool and the Washington Monument being 555 feet high, and you put a one in there,
Yeah.
and that came to 1555 when the slaves were first brought here, according to the Library of Congress. And they were saying, Farrakhan, why are you putting all this kind of stuff in there and talking all of this? And the minister said something very key. He said, I want the wise people in this country to know that I know their secrets. And so there was a lot to deal with. And it reminds me of the Bible, where when God put plagues on the land on Pharaoh and his people, he designed the plagues to not only serve as divine harassment for Pharaoh and his people and the oppression of the children of Israel, but he designed the plagues to visit the gods in the land of Egypt. The gods that lived in the imaginations of the people, plagues were used. And I even read that the biblical scholars say that the gods in Egypt were in the heavens, on the earth, and even in the subterranean regions. So he brought hail from the sky. He put locusts across the earth to destroy the harvest. And subterranean, he took amphibians like frogs that can live below sea level and come out on land to plague. So, this Million Man March, it addressed so much. And the minister going abroad, though it was not understood, I remember the first benefit of him going abroad was we've learned that everyone was watching this march.
Right.
I just had no idea that every camera on earth was on the Million Man March, but the ministers going abroad showed that. And it revealed that, I wish Ben had more time.
Yeah.
It revealed that they were so moved by what happened there that they told the minister, whatever they do to you all over there, we're going to do to them over here. Because the Europeans were certainly in their countries and that, but it also reinvigorated a Black man that went to school here in this area in America. He went to Lincoln University, and that was Kwame Nkrumah, who went back to Africa with his education, and his vision was for United States of Africa. So the Million Man March reinvigorated, it brought to life again the whole discussion among African presidents and chiefs about having a United States of Africa, because in truth, though we know that we are children and descendants of those from Africa, we see Africa as one. But when you go into Africa, they see themselves at their tribal levels, and they see themselves at their territories and things like that. But we don't see Africa that way. We see Africa as one, whether you're in Botswana or whether you're in Somali or whether you're in Egypt or Tunisia or whatever. Africa and Africans seem as one to us, but it's not necessarily the expression on the continent when you go. So the Million Man March, it just did a lot.
Yeah,
it did a lot for us. It took our stock up in the Nation of Islam and what we were able to do from the leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So
it gave us time, Brother Minister.
It gave us real time.
The world was
and we hope to have some other people on that were involved in this big historical movement, which I don't think has stopped. I think the minister started out looking at young Black males and this murdering of each other in the cities. He saw it as a pretext and an occasion for militarizing our neighborhoods, with National Guard coming in, and maybe out of desperation, we would be the ones calling them in. To help us at a point like that. And the minister was trying to head that off. And I just dare say that the Million Man March, the men's meetings, that movement, combating the murder of self and kind in our cities with the Stop the Killing tour and all of that, we really can trace a lot of that back to September the 17th, 1985,
That's right.
More Than a Vision experience. So
And
I
this
was
is
happy that Ben Chavis was able to be on with us, and I hope other people were able to yield something from his discussion. He has so much to share because in a short period of time, from 1995 to the year 2000, which is only 5 years, great work, follow-up work, if you will, of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who sometimes, because we look on such a small, limited domestic level, we have critics who say, well, there was no follow-up from the Million Man March, but I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Not only was there follow-up, Minister Louis Farrakhan's follow-up was colossal.
that's right.
And it was global. But when you've been fashioned and shaped by your oppressors to think only domestically,
Mhm.
You only see voting rights, being able to be at a toilet next to your oppressor, or being able to use the same water fountain he uses as an achievement. But God sent the minister around the world. So a real achievement is for us to really reach humanity on a large scale through the pain and suffering of others. Look at our pain and our suffering here in America. It exemplifies some of the greatest pain because the greatest level of oppression is here. We're oppressed at every level. Mental death and slavery, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad called it.
That's right.
So we thank all of them, and thank you, Brother Michael.
Thank
And
you.
that's another edition of the Souls of Black Folk. We air every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. You can go right to the Souls of Black Folk broadcast Facebook page, and you can go to the Souls of Black Folk broadcast, our YouTube page, and you can watch any of our programs that are on. We hope you stay with us. God bless and good night.